Donald Trump absolutely freaked out in response to and in the aftermath of a big news item relating to his legal cases. You may have heard of it. We'll talk about that with our legal expert, Aaron Parnas, in just a little bit. But I first want to show you Trump's recent social media activity. He levied a disgustingly shocking sexist attack against Kamala Harris and called for a bunch of his political opponents to be put in jail. I'll show you all these things. Let's start with this. And by the way, just imagine Trump. This is coming out at 5:39 p.m. dinner time at Mar-a-Lago or wherever he is. He should be enjoying some dinner, hanging out with Melania, as you know he loves to do, instead of firing off dozens of social media posts. The first one's in an effort to resurrect a dead witch hunt in Washington, D.C., in an act of desperation and in order to save face. The illegally appointed special counsel to Rein Jack Smith has brought a ridiculous new indictment against me, which has all the problems of the old indictment and should be dismissed immediately. His Florida document hoax case has been completely dismissed. This is merely an attempt to interfere with the election and distract the American people from the catastrophes Kamala Harris has inflicted on our nation, like the border invasion, migrant crime, rampant inflation, the threat of World War III, and more. So obviously a bunch of nonsense there, but we'll address the specifics of that Jack Smith-related talking point after going through this. He said persecution of a political opponent. And then we get to his retruthing up a storm. Okay? He retruthed this, how to actually, quote unquote, fix the system. And it's Biden in an orange jumpsuit, Hunter Biden in an orange jumpsuit, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, and Kamala Harris. Think about this. This is authoritarianism 101, saying all the people. What did Nancy Pelosi do? What did Dr. Fauci do? What did any of these? I mean, Hunter Biden obviously has been charged with his own personal crimes, but what are we talking about here? Kamala Harris, I know what the conspiracies are about Hillary Clinton, but Kamala Harris, what did she do? But put them all in orange jumpsuits, he says. And then if I can find, it looks like it's attempting to evade me, but here it is. A photo, again, one of his supporters, and then he retruths this. So he's posting it himself, even if someone else created it. It's a photo of Hillary Clinton and Vice President Kamala Harris. And some low-character person named Zeke said, funny how blowjobs impacted both their careers differently. This is the quality of critique we're getting from Trump. Just disgusting, vile, and yes, sexist garbage, filth coming from him. And then he continues and also posts this photo. There was enough evidence to throw them all in jail for perjury. They lied under oath about President Trump. Then they destroyed all evidence almost simultaneously to the Trump indictment. To avoid the penalty for perjury, and to avoid the public to ever find out about their crime and corruption. These are criminals of our country, the real threat to our democracy. And this is the January 6th Select Committee. A bunch of people who didn't lie under oath about Trump, who didn't destroy evidence, who aren't criminals, who haven't engaged in corruption. But they say all these people, just because they dared to investigate Trump's attempts to block the peaceful transfer of power, they should all be in jail. You know how when Trump gets himself into legal trouble and is given extensive due process and then is held accountable legally with no evidence that any Biden involvement has been a part of it, for example, or Kamala Harris involvement, they say that's terrible because you should never wish upon your political opponent jail. And then he posts one post after another. What's going on with this? Quick pause from the serious stuff to address a more lighthearted one. A lot of times these folks creating memes for Trump, they don't have the best grammar sometimes. So here they said they have enough of Democrat BS. And it's a photo of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Elon Musk, and Donald Trump. Of course, they have had enough of Democrat BS makes sense, but they have enough is as if they own the BS. They have it. They have obtained the BS and now they have enough of it. So strange wording there, but we continue forward. Another person posted this and Trump reposted it. All roads lead to Obama. Retruth if you want public military tribunals. So Trump gets some news about a legal case and just erupts into one post about his political opponents being locked up after another, and don't get numbed out to this. This is insane. This, I don't even know what I'm looking at. American coup d'etat. And it's a bunch of people who are guilty of crimes that they don't like. Most of them are probably not guilty of any crimes. And then another person that Trump posted saying, indict the unselect January 6th committee. Sedition. Retruth if you want them to be locked up. Again, they tell us we're terrible because we want Trump in jail, which we don't. We want Trump to get whatever accountability is justified. The legal process should figure that out. But that's the allegation that's levied against us, with no understanding of their own hypocrisy when they're actually overtly saying, lock them all up, I don't know. You have Liz Cheney in this photo. What did Liz Cheney do that you think is worthy of being locked up? Unbelievable. And I want to bring in now legal expert Aaron Parnas. It's been a while, Aaron. Great to be with you. I want to dive right into the big news. Explain to people what Jack Smith did and why it's impactful.
Yeah, so Jack Smith filed what is called a superseding indictment against Donald Trump. This is an additional indictment that kind of replaces the first one in Washington, D.C. That's the January 6th insurrection case. And Jack Smith did this because of the recent Supreme Court immunity decision that really changed the way Jack Smith had to prosecute Trump in D.C. Originally, Jack Smith was going to go after Trump for a number of things, including commandeering the Department of Justice to further his efforts to undermine the 2020 election. But after the immunity decision, that part of the scheme really was cut off because one could argue that it's an official act that Donald Trump as president spoke to the Department of Justice to take a certain action. So he went to a grand jury, about 20 Americans, who then reviewed the evidence again, presented the case that he was going to put forth in the first time around as well. And they chose to indict because they said that there was enough evidence to support a finding of probable cause on these 4 felony charges. So a new indictment, a superseding indictment, one that will help streamline the case moving forward.
And the way that I heard it described was some of the fat was removed. It was thinned down a little bit. Things removed from it that, like you said, could actually end up being a bit of leverage for Trump's side to challenge it. And are you expecting this to make an even stronger case in the wake of the immunity case? Meaning, now it's a little bit more difficult for Trump to stall the process?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's stronger because I think that the first case was at its strongest. But I think this is a common tactic that prosecutors do in a number of cases. They file superseding indictments to make the case clearer and oftentimes easier for a jury to understand. Sometimes you don't need 6 months of evidence to prove a criminal charge. You can prove a criminal charge much easier. And I think that's what he's doing here partly, is he's just making it easier for a jury to ultimately understand what the criminal charges are and why they should find guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And another thing here is that Donald Trump could have easily, and he still will, argue that the indictment is barred by the recent immunity decision, but that argument is now made much harder because of the superseding indictment, which took out a lot of the semi or even fully official acts that we saw before.
You know, I was thinking about that, even though I want as much evidence as possible to be included. Excuse me. I was thinking about before the complexity of a case like this, where when you read through the different actions that are alleged and that we saw out in the open, the different attempts behind closed doors to pressure people to do things, and how nationwide this broader effort to prevent Biden from coming into office illegally was, that probably is separate from, all right, we did the investigating We found all this evidence. We believe it breaks laws. We brought it in front of a grand jury. But in trial, I'm sure a big part of the process of prepping for that for Jack Smith's side is just figuring out how do we present this magnitude of evidence in a way that is cohesive and there's some storyline there. Is that right?
It is. And I mean, I think so. A lot of people probably will be shocked by this statement, but this isn't an easy case to prove by any means. I mean, it is not easy to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt against a former president when it comes to charges where he didn't necessarily directly say, go commit an insurrection, right? I mean, there is a number of pieces of circumstantial evidence. They're going to use his words against him, but this is not necessarily a clear-cut, start to finish, here's the murder weapon type of case. This is a case that's going to be months long, thousands of pieces of evidence. And if you're a juror, you have to be able to succinctly, or if you're a prosecutor, you have to make sure that the jury can succinctly synthesize all of the evidence. And I think that's what Jack Smith is really starting here by streamlining the indictment. He's making it easier for the jury to understand what the criminal charges are. He's going to ultimately, I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if there's another superseding indictment at some point in the next few months. This is just what prosecutors do to make it easier when they're ultimately going in front of a jury.
So you've used that term streamlining, and I've heard that multiple times from different people analyzing this. Is this serving to get things a little bit more fast-tracked, or does it not really impact the timeline at all?
I ultimately don't think it's going to impact the timeline. I mean, you're not going to see this go to trial until probably middle or end of next year at the earliest, and that's assuming Trump isn't elected, because if he's elected, he'll just pardon himself and quickly, or even just shut down this probe. And shut down the funding for the special counsel's office. So I think the timeline generally stays the same. And it's not surprising. I actually expected this. I don't know if you recall, but about a month ago, Jack Smith was never objected to postponing, or even I think may have even sought a postponement in an initial hearing in front of Judge Chutkan following the Supreme Court decision. And I'm sure he did that because the goal was to seek this superseding indictment. They're no longer in a rush to prosecute Trump, given the fact that the election is now less than 70 days away.
Yeah, unfortunate. We're not going to know the outcome of this case as Trump's trying to be president again when the case pertains to him trying to end the peaceful transfer of power last time he was president. Very unfortunate. Aaron, where can people find you?
On all my social platforms, just at Aaron Parnas.